So, Castlevania Season 3. I'm still shocked by how good this season is, and overall I'm just impressed with this show in this season for being the light in the darkness that I needed right now. If you've not seen this show yet, it is on Netflix. Seasons 1 and 2 are a combined 12 episodes, so that is light work, and when I say it's worth it, I really do mean it. And no fear, this is the kind of anime that can be watched by non-anime lovers, so no weird anime tropes you don't understand, or cartoonish facial expressions that pull you out of the movie or show. This story is not limited by its medium, so if you've been warming up to animated stuff in general, then here's a chance to jump in.
Warning, this show is dark. It has very realistic and gory depictions of murder and death.
Just saying. So the rest of this is just gonna be me talking about this season and more or less gushing about how much I loved it. While you can argue over which storyline was best, I really do think that each one had their own unique draw and way of engaging you. So Trevor and Sypha's storyline starts considerably light and slow, most of the focus being paid to their romantic relationship and the difficulty they're having in thinking long term, which is fine because it's actually quite cute and funny. They introduce you to some really interesting characters, one being Count Saint Germain, who is one of my favorites this season because he intentionally presents himself as like a snake oil salesman. His dialogue is witty and hilarious. I cherish all of the scenes he has with the Priory leader where he's just bullshitting and manipulating him. There's also the town judge who goes by Judge. Red flag. And this one was especially fucked up because when I realized I wanted to make a review of this show, that reveal hadn't happened. So I remember thinking very fondly and wanting to gush about how cool and relaxed and confident this character is. Meanwhile, he likes to lead kids into forced death traps, so they loop it back wonderfully with him saying that his job had its little pleasures. And I remember him saying that the first time and me thinking, wow, what a down-to-earth guy. Anyway, this storyline is tied to the idea that this infinite corridor is essentially an interdimensional travel device. And we are treated to some of the most fantastic, eerie, disturbing visuals when they show us what Count Saint Germain sees inside the infinite corridor. And it's not the visuals themselves that's disturbing, it's the implications and how that impacts Count Saint Germain in the scene. I love this sequence because each world they give you a glimpse into is so distinct and different and worthy of analysis. They truly feel like glimpses into other lived-in worlds. Like, look at this one. You have this group running into what looks like the final act of a superhero movie. And what's going on with their feet? What kind of power is that? They just pack so much interesting information in that 5 seconds for us to speculate on, and I love it. It is definitely a top moment for me. Trevor and Sypha don't really get much by way of character development in this arc, although it seems that the dark nature of how this mission ended may have an effect on Trevor and Sypha moving forward. They did bless us with some amazing fight scenes. One thing Castlevania does really well with its fight scenes is creating a sense of difficulty and stakes. While Trevor and Sypha are kicking ass, it looks difficult. They're frequently overwhelmed, knocked over, cut. It makes for a really engaging experience. They're also extremely creative. You're hard pressed to find any two kills that look the same. Also, Sypha is the Avatar on steroids. Isaac's storyline was by far my favorite because it felt the most complete. You have Isaac, who after the events of season 2 is isolated and spiraling. He doesn't start conflict, but he welcomes it. He's abandoned his religious practices, and he only really has one goal in mind: revenge against Carmilla and Hector. Unfortunately, he's starting at ground zero, so this season was him preparing to achieve this goal. But what he and I didn't expect was for this preparation to become a journey of self-discovery. My favorite scene was definitely Isaac's conversation with the captain, where the captain challenges the necessity to wipe out the human race. Isaac is sure that humanity is destructive and cruel, and that the world would benefit from a fresh start without them. He then references his negative experience with the port guards as evidence. The captain wisely points out that Isaac had revealed that a man showed him kindness earlier that day, somewhat contradicting his assertion. What Isaac is doing, and the captain points out, is something that therapists call disqualifying the positive. This is where you turn positive or neutral events into negative ones by insisting that they don't count in order to maintain a destructive mental distortion. The reason I bring this definition is that this scene feels like a therapy session for Isaac, a much needed one. The captain then plants an idea that seems to resonate with Isaac, and that is to exact his revenge, but to then leverage the power gained through conquest to change humanity. He recognized the potential in Isaac and gave him an opportunity to assess what he actually wants out of life. I always had a sense that this character was destined for more in this story, and I'm so glad that he's finally getting fleshed out. Fleshed out? On top of being an incredibly complex character, Isaac is super powerful. There's a scene where his night creatures are throwing guards at him and he's just catching them on his knife and turning them into zombies. It's so cool a fight mechanic that I just want to play as him in a video game. This brings me to another top moment, which is Isaac's assault on the hypnotized city. This sequence is really epic in scale, and is no doubt where most of the money was allocated for this season. But this money did not go to waste because the result was, in my opinion, one of the greatest one-on-one magic fight scenes of all time. When the magician realizes that the individual citizens couldn't do the trick against Isaac, he assembles them all into a giant ball of people and starts throwing chunks at him. And Isaac's just on his demon unicorn, dodging human meteors. Again, this show is so good at making combat look dangerous. When Isaac emerges at the top of the tower, there's a real satisfaction there because he earned it. It was difficult and you were there through the whole process. So he kills the mage, finds the mirror, and basically completes the last step of his preparation. He has a location of his target, people to create an army, and a mirror to transport them. Mind you, his steps never really changed, but Isaac did. Following Isaac's victory, he orders his demons to kill all the people, but to spare the city destruction. He goes on to say perhaps others will occupy the city one day, or perhaps it'll become a monument. And I really do think he means humans when he says others. Could it be that while he has no problem killing the city's people to bolster his army, ultimately he has a goal of helping humanity? Might be a stretch, but I just can't help but read into Isaac's reaction to the captain's idea. So next up is Carmilla and the Council of Vampire Sisters, which is a great band name. I'm thinking an all-girl punk band. You're shown how each of them has an important role on this team. Carmilla acts as this eccentric CEO who dreams big. You have Morena, who's this pragmatist. You have Striga, the military expert, who I think high-key is the most powerful out of all of them, and Lenore, the diplomat. While they do give us enough to chew on with the other sisters, this is primarily Lenore and Hector's storyline. Lenore became my second favorite character this season, and that's because on a show full of spellcasting and sword fighting, it's refreshing for a character's greatest strength to be communication. She's intelligent, charming, and most importantly, persuasive. This storyline explores manipulation in a really uncomfortably effective way.
Good boy.
There's this one scene where Lenore is talking to Hector about how her and her sister's goals really line up with Hector's previous goals, and she presents it in such an effective way that I, the viewer, was convinced. I can't really think of any realistic better outcome that Hector could have gotten, so it really might be the case that this was his best option, and Lenore, correctly reading Hector, realized he'd have to be tricked there. I don't know, would you rather be free in a cage or a vampire sex slave? Choices. What's great is that the flaw with Lenore's character isn't that she's cruel, it's that she doesn't see Hector as a person. Lenore engages with Hector respectfully at the beginning for the same reason I stick out the back of my hand for a dog to sniff. This is truly revealed when Hector attempts to speak in the council room, and Lenore lovingly says, "Shh, the real people are talking." And it's not angry, it's said with such an understanding tone, which, I mean, if you think about it, how mad can you get at your dog? This was a tough season for Hector, but I am curious to see how or if he bounces back. Will he completely submit? Will he feign submission and wait for an opportunity? I don't know. This was by far the least dynamic plot. There wasn't a lot of movement or action, but I still really enjoyed it as a nice change of pace. I remember getting really excited at the idea of a genuine master-disciple story arc, but you could tell there was a dark turn coming just by the sheer lack of significant conflict. If I'm being completely honest, Sumi and Taka's betrayal of Alucard was a little jarring. It just didn't really seem in their character to be mad at him, since privately hours before, they sympathize with him and say they want to give him a gift, which they did. I just kind of assumed if they were gonna kill him, it would have been out of mercy, since they did express that they believed him suicidal. But in their last moments, they just expressed such a gross side of their character that I didn't know existed. I worry that this was just a convenient way to make the impact on Alucard seem bigger, which was kind of the whole point of this story arc. It's a repeating of history. He's starting to understand his father and his relationship with humans and how that impacted him. I think this is gonna make for a very interesting character moving forward. And to end on such a disturbing scene followed by a very lasting last image of this new Alucard, I thought it was just a really nice exclamation point on this season, and it kind of reaffirms that obviously his plot was taking a bit of a slow pace for a reason. This is an impactful moment. And I can understand if maybe it was a little too disturbing, a little bit too dark, but what I will say is that it is kind of relevant to the plot and the lore behind Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, in the show as well as outside the show. Another really amazing aspect of this show is the vision it seems to have. There are conflicts, reunions, and mysteries that I still want more information on. There's a lot of setup for this next season and maybe seasons after that. You know, I haven't seen this much setup since Game of Thrones, really. Which brings us to a small elephant in the room, which is the fact that this show kind of has a Game of Thrones-y format. And maybe that's a strike to its originality, but it does so in an effective manner, so I have no problem with it at all. Guys, you know I hate putting out content, but this isn't for me. I do this because the prospect of it not being renewed is too painful. So please watch it, and if you won't, just let it run on your laptop. I don't care if it fucks up your suggestions, maybe you need more anime in your life.